Welcome back, everyone. It is Tuesday night, and that means we are back for First Take Tuesdays here on Getting Defensive, brought to you by Gridiron Ratings. I am your host, Kraig. And me, as always, we have James. James, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well. Happy Tuesday to you guys. How are you doing, Gary?
Doing great, doing great. Knee deep in 5 weeks in waiver wire talk.
Yeah, and that's going to be part of what we're talking about here tonight. We do have the first of four bye weeks with the Falcons, 49ers, Saints, and Jets, and those certainly play a factor into what you're doing on your waiver wire and your maneuvering with their team in general. And make sure you guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, as I know most of you are here, make sure you hit that like and subscribe so you get all the information from Gridiron Ratings, whether it's us or, you have Matt, I know, going over things, and you have some waiver videos popping up too. Make sure you get all that good content. And while you're at it, you can go check out Gary's stuff on gridironratings.com. You can go into the IDP tipster's office and see what he has all cooking up there with his rolling waivers. And I know that's something you had. You update that on Tuesdays, is that right, or is it throughout the week?
Actually, it's Monday and Tuesdays. It's a kind of a soft update on Monday because I just go over what the 20-some IDP guys or the rolling waivers or whatever, I update what they did Sunday. And then I make a couple of adjustments. And then I add the new people and got an IR tracker on there now. So it's pretty cool. It's something that I've done in the past, and now I'm kind of trying to share it with people, see how they like it.
All right. Well, on the topic of buys and all that, we will get into later, but a couple of guys that we wanted to talk about here right off the bat that I know people had a lot of hope and promise for that might not be doing what we had thought they would be, or at least hoped. Jeremy Chinn and Zach Cunningham are guys have had really reduced output this year, even though in Chinn's case he's playing about the same as he had been, that 100% snap share. Cunningham's has seemingly fallen out of favor with the coaching staff, even though he's going to be there for at least another year, barring a trade with that contract that he has. So, James, I want to ask you, in your sort of redraft leagues, are these guys that you're keeping right now, or are you looking to move on from these guys with waivers, with the bye weeks coming up, and you're looking for replacements year long through the waivers?
You kind of hit the main point that I was going to talk about very quickly there, which is snap count. Chinn's playing every single snap, and he hasn't produced very well, but there's a lot of studs out there who've kind of underproduced to start the season. And while I'd like to see him be a star, and he hasn't been one yet, I'm absolutely holding on to him and just seeing how it plays out. Whereas when you go over and you look at Zach Cunningham, sure, 2 weeks ago he played 100% of the snaps, but last week he was at half that. And that is massive cause for concern. I know it's only 1 week, so I'm not ready to just cut bait and leave him on my waiver wire immediately. But with his bye upcoming, I'm going to be paying strong attention to how that snap count looks the next week or two, and he very easily could find himself needing a new home because he'll be off my rosters. It's early to say to cut him and just move on, but also if you did because you were desperate and he was the weakest guy on your roster, I wouldn't fault you.
Gary, do you think that Kirksey's going to be the main guy since he sort of had that main role thus far this year? Or do you think that they're going to just kind of see what they have with Camus, and they're sort of having him play that Cunningham role for a week or two here?
Yeah, I just, the only one I own right now is Kirksey, in my opinion. I'm done messing around with Cunningham. Unless it's a deeper format. If it was a dynasty and he's still got some kind of did you know he they signed him a big old contract a while back, and then they made him take a pay cut, put it down to like $5 million for this season. Right before, I didn't know that until I was looking into this whole situation. They only played him that 50%. I think that I just don't trust him anymore. So in shallower formats, if there's something shinier on there, If I'm going to get a better play out of it, and if I don't have a deep bench, I'm ready to cut bait on Cunningham. I think there's plenty of viable replacements out there to get through the rest of this year instead of messing with him. Because he's just costing you right now. If he straightens out and he's still available, sure. I'm pretty well done with him. When it comes to Chinn, I mean, it's sad that all the ADP that was put into this, or the value of any fantasy football to get these guys on dynasty squads. Chinn, I mean, I can't suggest I'm going to move on from him, but he's just DB2 now, I guess, with upside. I mean, he's a depth guy. I'm hanging out with him for a while, but when it comes to Cunningham, I don't like how this is going. And I know Grugier Hill really well. And it's not that I don't think he's good. I know he's one heck of an athlete. He was actually on my radar a few years ago in Philadelphia, but he just, I don't know. See, and he does like getting nicked up too. So, Cunningham might be back in the mix eventually anyhow. But I'm just done with Cunningham. I can't do it.
All right. Well, dealing with these guys and seeing if you're able to find someone for their buys, if you want to hang on to them or cut bait with them and find someone else. That's sort of the topic you had for tonight, James, with working the buys. So why don't you tell us how you go about doing that?
Yeah, and before I even get started, what I'm about to pitch to you right here, it can't work in all leagues. Some leagues you got too thin of a bench, other leagues your waiver wire is just too deep, or you got leagues where you can't even pull off a trade because that's just not how your other league members work. So you got to understand that this isn't for everyone, but you have to outwork your competition on the buys. And what does that mean? Well, it means you need to know what you're going to do, and you're going to execute what you're going to do before the rest of your league does. So if you need a linebacker next week, why don't you make the ad this week? Yes, you're spending an extra roster spot. You don't have that roster spot sitting there for maybe a dirty O guy who might go off, but in all likelihood won't. But what you're doing is you're preemptively making the ad and not needing to use your waiver claim next week. So if there is some dirty O guy who goes off who's sitting out there, you can use your waiver claim. You want to beat your competition to the buys. Do you need a DL and your opponent needs a DL? Well, then maybe use the back half of your roster in a deep league to swallow them up for this week so that you've hurt your opponent. It's a great strategy. You need to know what to do with your buys. Right now we've got Atlanta, New Orleans, the Jets, 49ers. They're all on buys this week, and you already knew that. But maybe you didn't comprehend that means they're not going to be on buys the rest of the season. So all those guys on those rosters are great trade targets after this weekend's. Sure, maybe none of those teams will look like they're going to be superstar teams, but there's plenty of value. And when you're trading for a guy like Demario Davis, you're not just getting Demario Davis, you're getting Demario Davis plus one additional week for the guy you're trading who hasn't had his bye yet. That's a tangible difference. That's not absolutely nothing. The biggest area that you can take advantage of, though, it's trades. There's going to be plenty of managers who are peddling Jets and Falcons, and you can go after them this week for exactly what I said. They don't have a bye coming up. You might make a deal, and the optics are you lost the deal because you overpaid for someone, but you're doing the math on the fact that you get an extra week out of them, and the rest of your league isn't. So, again, you have to work the buys. They're a huge part of winning and losing in fantasy football, and these are just some strategies that you can take care of and actually go and have a plan versus just sitting there looking at your roster and going, oh, this week I have X, Y, and Z. Make a plan, stick to it. It's the only way to play.
So for the leagues that you play in, do you usually have those larger size benches for like redraft type leagues, or just something more that you do in sort of dynasty leagues?
In general, I'm doing it in dynasty leagues, and I'm doing it in just kind of standard size redrafts. I tend to kind of avoid those deep leagues, despite the fact that I love rating my players deep, because I just hate leagues where you draft and then you have to just make trades. Otherwise, that's all you're going to do. So I love adding, in a non-IDP league, a team defense a week early, so I don't have to use my waiver claim. And in an IDP league, I love looking ahead and using the back half of my roster through these buys to just set my roster for next week. I don't have to worry about where I'm going to go and where I'm going to attack. And yeah, I lose some upside on some holding on to some rookies who might pop off. But I think we are all pretty aware that on the offensive side, the rookies have either popped off already or they're going to pop off very late. It doesn't really happen in week 7 and week 8 and week 9. So I like to take advantage this way, and I really think it's an underutilized strategy, and I just highly recommend it to everyone.
Is that something you do too, Gary?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, realistically, I don't know. He started getting me to think about Pete Warner. I mean, thinking ahead of the curve, just like you was mentioning earlier. I mean, he went from 50% to 100% snap count 2 days or two contests. He's producing. If they continue to do this, but he's on bye this week. So if people are in those type of situations, you can go pick him up. You kind of can do the same thing with Gerard Davis, I believe. If you're planning ahead and you've got those benches, I like the bench spots. Kraig, you're in a couple of my leagues. I mean, I do give a decent amount, but I like to keep the waiver wire active, and it's usually the IDP that's flowing through there the most, and I think that's part of it too. James, being part of the Gridiron Ratings crew, I'm surprised you're not in any of the leagues that got together for us. The IDP incentive, which is our main flagship for the IDP department or whatever on Gridiron Ratings, kind of gets you in there, man. That's a keeper league. So we'll probably have an opening. 16.
Yeah, I was on way too many assignments heading into this season, and I just laxed on joining additional leagues. But I absolutely need to get in one. They're all just fantastic, and frankly, I need to add more versus get less.
Yeah, little money leagues, $25 or something to get in, and then you get to win. Nice cat.
Ooh, nothing like adding cash.
Yeah.
Something else to take into account here when you're looking at these bye weeks, the amount of injuries, and I don't have quantifiable numbers, but it feels like, and maybe it's a combination of the injuries along with the rotations that we're seeing in some of these, but it feels like there's more relevant players, big name players getting hurt. Just this past week, and we don't have to give thoughts on all of these, but Levante David's going to be out for a couple weeks, at least with an ankle sprain. Devin Bush, once again, the Steelers get hit with a groin injury. I'm not sure what they're doing there. Rashaan Evans, Myles Jack, Chandler Jones, all through various things, are going to be potentially missing time. Chandler Jones apparently had a positive COVID test, so that's at least a week, I believe, that he's going to be missing there. You pile these on top of the number of injuries that we've already had, and then bye weeks, and next week is going to be a big week for bye weeks. Week 7, to James's point, to plan ahead. I think we have 6 teams on bye next week. Does it feel to you guys like we're having, Gary, I'll ask you first on this one. Does it feel like you're having to dig deeper than you have in years past to try to find guys to fill those bench spots and, your deeper league starters?
I don't know. I think personally, my waiver wire is full of suggestions because you got players like David Long coming into this, coming into their own. You have plenty. I think there's plenty of versatility this year. I think that there are plays that can be played each week via the matchup. We've got a whole different kind of pool to me of some depth players. We've got players that, they've been in the league for 2 or 3 years. They've never produced like this in the past, not this consistency, not at this high level, or maybe they just didn't do it last year. But what I'm saying is that we seem to have a whole different type of top tier IDP group. It's a mixture, and it's injuries, whatever. As far as these injuries go, Devin Bush is not surprising. Sorry, James. But when it comes to the rest of them, I almost wonder if they're pulling the trigger a little quicker and putting these guys. They got a 17, they're looking ahead with the 17, games. I don't know. Longer season, thinking ahead. I don't know if that's a possibility, but we're going to start talking about Kevin Minter at some point because he's probably the guy to replace David.
Yep.
There's multiple names that people could go at linebacker. I mean, Anthony Walker just came off. I looked at ESPN. He's still underutilized. He's a good guy to pick up for this coming week. He's going to go back up to about the 90% or so, probably snap count. You didn't do that. You never get, in my opinion, I always tell people, don't go and get a guy that was on IR for 3 weeks and put him in as soon as you get him. You got to give him that week. Kind of, they rarely do they put a guy that's been on IR for 3 weeks in and he gets 100% of the snaps and he goes off. That's very rare. So you might as well just let him prime up on your waiver wire. If you could possibly do that by, as James explained, thinking ahead. It's a strategy because you could get somebody like, let's say you pick up Pete Warner and he continues that pace that he did right before he went to this bye, and there's no reason for us to think that he's not, other than the fact that it's not usually what New Orleans does. Okay, but if you worked out, you got one player at your linebacker, he might possibly bring in LD1 numbers each week and just be a consistent, and you won't take a zero or you won't take a hit in that box score. It's still lady luck, fantasy football gods, all that. But thinking ahead is getting ahead of the curve of everybody else that's in your league, if it's possible.
So, James, with those guys that were injured, and again, we got David out for sure for a while, Chandler Jones for a week anyway. The other three we're not really sure. Myles Jack I found interesting where he lost the green dot for the team, and then he hurt his back and he left the game. Are these situations where you're looking to see who takes over with any real interest, or is it more of a probably not going to be replaced by a guy that you're that interested in?
In general, it's just all determined based on the length of the injury. So, with David being out, relatively a sizable amount, I'm interested. But with Chandler Jones out probably this week, maybe limited snaps next week, maybe, I'm not really interested unless I just simply need a plug and play. And relatively speaking, I don't want to guess with my plug and plays. I want to know that I've got a certain amount of snaps coming versus saying I don't know what's coming because this is the first time Jones is out. So, yes, I'm interested in figuring out what we have to do with all these guys, but at the same time, I'm not really that interested in the replacements because they're going to be 1 week replacements, and I'm looking ahead, and I really don't need 1 week replacements the week of. I want them a little bit further ahead just by the way I run my rosters.
Gary, with Myles Jack specifically, he's a guy that has a contract that he can get out of relatively easily in terms of dead money after this year. Do you think when he's back and healthy, he's going to be having a full-time spot, or is it, and who knows what Urban Meyer's doing, let's be honest, but do you think it's a situation where that coaching staff is trying to see for someone else that they like better?
Well, I don't know what Urban Meyer's really up to, but the way it looks, I think Myles Jack's probably going to be seeing a lot less snaps on going forward. I think he could drop down to about this 60%. It really depends. If we knew that he would stay at the 90% or something, it's just kind of doubtful right now. If we thought that he could stay at the 90% without the green dot, that's perfectly fine with me. I didn't see it as a losing. I thought it was smart how they did it. I think that Myles Jack does do better when he's not actually in charge of calling the plays. There's something going on there. He had a good season last year, and I can't remember who was the middle linebacker last year.
Schobert, I think.
Right. So he didn't have to worry about it. Jack had a pretty decent year. Either way it goes. I do like Wilson. I think he's going to be the one that's going to be taking care of the green dot most of the time now. And basically, it's not that I like him. This would be a deeper format, where you're playing 4 linebackers or something. I like him like an LB3 or something in a deep league. I think he's going to get more snaps, and I think there's going to be more opportunities. He might not get you those. It's kind of like David Long, another guy that people should think about picking up off the waiver wire in Tennessee. They may not get you the splash plays, the interceptions or whatever, but they're going to give you the base tackles. They're going to get you that nice I mean, their opportunities right now for the next couple of weeks are probably about 8 combined minimal floor, just because they're going to be productive by default. It does matter. And, I was talking about Cunningham. I dropped Cunningham right now in a regular league. If it was a standard size league, Cunningham be gone for either one of those guys right now, because I think their upside's there where I don't see. I'm tired of messing with Cunningham. And cut bait at some point, unless you're in the dynasty deep league, you can't do that. But I mean, in most standard leagues, I'm done. Oh, I'm going to start letting those names. Actually, I have let a couple of the names hit the market already. It's a weird year. I'm going to chase the points, but I'm going to make sure that the matchup strength for these players is right when I do pick them up to play. You got to play the odds.
I feel like I need to get a little bit defensive with you on Cunningham.
It's been a while. Good. We need a little bit of defense.
Simply because, he was out last week with COVID. Came back this week. He had, I think, a 52% snap count, which obviously not a good look because, the other two linebackers, they were rocking 100%. But also, he came back from COVID. They might be easing him back in a little bit. And the week before he was out, he did rack up 14 combined tackles. That's an excellent fantasy output. I agree. If we're going to say that, is Zach Cunningham better in fantasy or real life? The answer is fantasy 10 times out of 10. But am I ready to cut bait yet? No.
Let me ask you a question. If he comes back within the next couple of weeks, do you think as long as Kirksey's in there, that Cunningham's ever going to return to that upper? I mean, he finished the last 2 years in the top 10, did he not? In combined tackles, and did really well. I don't think we'll ever see that ceiling at this point this year. So
sure,
I'm thinking more of a high linebacker 2, maybe, which I can get that kind of production and not have to sit on him and not have the risk, because so far he's let us down. Whatever the excuse has been.
He's let us down, but there's been some reasons outside of just the on-field performance, and I don't think the ceiling is a high-end linebacker too. I think he can come back and be, a quality linebacker next to Kirksey. Now, that Houston defense is going to be on the field a lot. None of us trust that offense, even with Davis Mills looking halfway decent last week. So I think that that's a team that can support 2 very good linebackers. And, maybe I'm crazy, but I don't think Kirksey keeps this up the entire season. By all means, I'm interested in buying him and putting him on my roster, but I don't know if he's going to be a pure dominating stud for 17 straight weeks. I think there'll be some blips in there.
If he's not hurt.
Right, and I definitely think that Cunningham could be a guy who steps in when Kirksey has a little bit of a blip. So I'm not ready to just cut bait with Cunningham outright anywhere, especially to go add the replacement for Myles Jack. That's not what I'm going to endorse, but, maybe I just have too much patience this year. There's always that fine line where you need to cut bait with somebody, and we're going into week 6. So I don't necessarily disagree with Gary deciding, there's some people he needs to cut. Like, for instance, I have a league where I own Zach Cunningham and Myles Jack. I know Myles Jack isn't going to be on my roster next week, but Cunningham's going to stick around. So maybe my line's just different, but I can't endorse just flat cutting Zach Cunningham for the whoever is the flavor of the week this week. I'm not there yet.
With the way that you had making sure my mic was on. The way that you talked about looking ahead with the waivers and all that, James, is something else that you do. Do you consider some of these guys coming back from injuries that had been names before? I mean, to varying degrees. Danny Trevathan, Jared Davis, Amani Hooker. I know Gary's invested a little bit in a couple of those guys, but is it only a larger, deeper bench that you're looking to add those guys and see if they're going to take over that role in a week or two, or do you sort of wait until they've already gotten back up to speed and take that chance that someone else is going to grab them?
Yeah, it's all dependent on league size, and I guess if you have a wonky format, but in a relatively standard league where you're starting, 2 at each position, a linebacker, D-line, and DB, none of these guys are interesting me in this week. If someone else wants to go and use a roster spot to go add them, and it's not a super deep bench league, then I'll let my opponents take that risk, and if they hit, great, but I'll focus my efforts elsewhere. It's kind of like what Gary said. You don't want to add a guy who's coming off injured reserve and throw him in your lineup week 1, because in all likelihood, he's not just getting unleashed and ready to go. Because if he is, that means he only had a 1-week injury to begin with. And if he had a 1-week injury to begin with, he probably didn't go on IR. So I'm not necessarily ready to add any of these guys and think that they're worth rostering. There's definitely the potential there. I'm not going to fault someone for going there, but you're going to have to wait a week or two. And when we're entering the bye weeks, I don't want to wait a week or two with my roster spots. I want to either load up for next week or I want to have someone who I have confidence in immediately. So in general, no, these are my opponent's waiver ads, not mine.
Yeah, not in standard leagues. Not for me, but in deep leagues. Yeah, I know these guys are – I know there's plenty of these guys that aren't as shiny that are just getting there that at least I'm listening that Kraig and the leagues that we're in, their names are being picked up and they're being rotated in some of those waiver wires that we've been seeing the last couple of weeks. And I'm expecting it to be even busier. But, folks, these are where we're starting 4 linebackers, 3 or 4 DL, and 3 or 4 DB. So we got 11, 12 starters, whatever it is on IDP side. Those are deep leagues, folks. So depends where you want to go. I mean, if you're in a standard size league, you should never reach for anybody until you know for sure they're going to be a lock. There should be. I find that when I talk to people, when I ask them what's on your waiver wire, they'll name off players I'm shocked that are on the waiver wire. But as soon as they see that, I understand. Okay, how many people do you start a week? And they're like 3. Oh, that explains it. Because the last thing anybody does in IDP leagues, even in small ones, is if they're the last ones on the waiver wire. If there's going to all those long shot offensive wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, all that dirty O stuff, they're already, they're stashed, and then there's actual starters usually on the waiver wire. So in that league, I wouldn't go reaching for any of these people that you hear us talking about deep leagues. There's a lot of risk there. They'll be there in 3 weeks still if they're still producing, likely.
So of those guys we talked about, Gary, Hooker, I'm assuming once he's healthy, will be back because that secondary is just atrocious in Tennessee. But Trevathan and Davis have actually had replacements play well in their absence, in terms of fantasy production, and they've actually done decently in real life too. Do you think it's going to be more of a competition, or do you see those guys reverting to take back the roles they had been slated for?
Well, I hope. I can't say for sure. I'm not inside there. But either way, I'm really hoping that Jared Davis' role particularly was already a lock. I think there was hopefully prior commitments there. They just picked up Quincy Williams. I think he was actually picked him up off the waiver wire.
He was cut at the end of August, and they got him at the start of September.
I don't think the combination either. I think they would rather have Mosley playing where Quincy's been playing. That's where I think Mosley's supposed to be playing. And then Jared Davis would be up there where Mosley's been playing. Yeah, I believe when it comes in. I like Jared Davis in deep leagues. I think that he's worth a pickup. Can't bet on anything, folks, but I mean, I'm talking deep leagues too. I've got him sitting. I've been holding on to him on IR on active rosters, just waiting to see. I've been working around it, but I mean, who was the other player?
Danny Trevathan with Ogletree.
No, I think Danny almost got cut in the offseason. I think that was a rumor, so I'm not really sure he's going to step right back in. I think Ogletree might hold on to that situation. Not real sure, but I'm not real sure. Danny's, no, I'm not worried about it. You? How about you?
Well, I mean, to your point, we're not mind readers. We're taking best guess at some of this and using the best information available. A part of me thinks that Quincy Williams might hang on to his job. He does have that relationship with his brother, and he's performed well. And, there were high hopes for him originally in Jacksonville when they drafted him. So do I think he'll just automatically take it over? And you're keep what he had? No, I mean, at some point they're probably going to see what they have in Davis to see if they want either of these guys long term on a young defense.
Yeah.
But I think they might have found something in Quincy, so I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Well, hey, I'll tell you, man, it wouldn't shock me because he has played well. I don't know what's happened, but he's certainly getting the job done. So.
Some guys, it just takes a while to figure it out. Maybe he'll be one of those.
Yes, it does.
Speaking of waivers, wires here again, the next topic we had is any deeper format league targets that you're looking for. And I know this will be sort of league specific because deep to your average IDP person might not be deep to Gary, who's starting, 5 linebackers in one league or something. But
hey, I want to mention something. I've been using the waiver or my start sit formula and IDP incentive. I've been streaming different cornerbacks each week, and this is a 16-team league, 30 bench or something. There's some IDP on there, plenty of cornerbacks, and I have not missed but like one that didn't get but a couple of tackles or something. I'll tell you, folks, check out those charts if you get a chance. Become a member of Gridirons if you would. Subscribe here and check that stuff out. It is good stuff. It works. I'm sorry. I got distracted by that.
No problem. I have one dynasty league where it's cornerback required too, and that's just what I do with it. I'm not going out and drafting a big name guy, and if I think I have someone that's going to be the next Marlon Humphrey or something, I'll try to hang on to him on the bench. But yeah, it's kind of fun, something to do too, in different leagues where most teams aren't required to start a cornerback in IDP leagues. So when you can find something different, it can be fun. James, do you have any sort of deeper names that you're looking at on your waiver wires in general for this week to potentially add?
I feel real beat up by you guys because my top 2 targets here were Pete Werner and Quincy Williams. So you guys just stole all my thunder, but great minds think alike. And yeah, both of them are on
waiver wires, man. They've been on there for weeks. I'm just messing with you, James.
Oh, I know, but this is for the free people. This is for the people who don't subscribe and get that information a week or 2 early. But Werner and Quincy Williams, those are 2 guys on buys right now. In general, neither one of them has a huge track record. Werner is young and sexy, so he might get held on to a little bit longer than a guy like Quincy Williams. But both of them are people you can go add right now because anyone who looks at the projected next week outcome is going to see a 0.00 for their score. So you can go and get pretty cute and go grab them. If you want to go a little bit deeper, I like Greedy Williams. He's got very nice snap count the past 2 weeks. He's on my Browns. People are going to have to pass against him, and I think you can do a lot worse when you're attacking a DB position, especially in leagues where you're forced to start corners. And then I'd also like to say Jaylen Phillips. Again, a very young and sexy name who maybe hasn't produced well, but he gets a very nice matchup against the Jaguars coming up this week. And if I'm going to play matchups anywhere, that's the kind of guy I want to play a matchup with. So let me plug him in at my DL position or my edge position or maybe even a linebacker position in the deeper league. If he's out there and you're not in a dynasty league, I think this could be the week that you can get him to pay off and be a very, very nice ad.
Gary, not to give any corporate secrets away here for free or something, but do you have any sort of names that you're looking at in your deeper leagues to add this week?
Let's see. On how vanilla to go. We'll go deep. How about a cornerback play? I like Desmond King. He was actually not owned very much on ESPN when I looked this morning. That's why I made a list. He's going to get a matchup this week. Let's see. I've already mentioned a few guys.
He's on Houston, right?
What's that?
Desmond King's on Houston, right?
Yes,
Just so we're letting people know.
I believe he's marked as a QB. I don't think he's marked as a safety. So, yeah, so that should be good. I'm impressed with Jalen Thompson. He's actually getting something done over there, producing for Arizona. So, he's passed the test, and a few people would drop Trey Hendrickson, and he just he was a good pickup this past week, and he had a good MSR coming up again this week. So sorry, matchup strength. So he should still be back on the radar. So that's kind of vanilla. If you want deep, folks, you gotta become a Gridiron ratings. I don't know how, believe it or not, there is more deep here, folks. If you just think that the few names we dropped today, they're there. We're here. I love playing on my fantasy league. I love that deep dynasty type feel. Just leave enough. Don't take too big of benches, folks. I'm not sure why people make a league where they have 48 roster spots.
Ooh, I know why they do it.
Why? Why?
Because they want to have an awesome draft and they don't want to think about their team in season. They don't want to put any type of effort or thought into their league. Sorry.
Boom, man.
I don't have any redraft leagues like that. I am in one dynasty league. It's 12 teams. It's 55-man rosters, but it's also the Devy's included in on that, and that includes IDP.
How boring is that? Nobody wants to trade. Nobody.
It's not boring at all. I mean, the Devy component
really?
throws a whole different kink into it where people are trying to get people ahead of time that they like. And there's still guys that you can find, especially, like I said, just rotating cornerbacks. People aren't paying a whole lot of attention to them. You got to start one in that league.
I think Kraig just got defensive, James.
Yeah, there's no way I would touch that type of league right now. And if I did, I would have probably 0 Debbys on my roster and just constantly trade them for actual current production. But I'm not in those leagues, so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I have one league like that, and that's enough for me. And that's actually what I've done most years with my Devy is because that's the only time you can get those guys is through the draft. So I'll draft a bunch of big-name Devy guys, and then if they start blowing up, I'll trade them away because, they're 3-4 years away anyway. And it's worked out for me in that league. So that's exactly what I've been doing with it.
Newsflash, I have never played a Devy league.
Neither have I.
Yeah, I'm a degenerate when it comes to that sort of stuff. I got into one, and I watch little to no college football, so I'm like digging into stuff in the off season and finding out names. So it's just a different thing. It's certainly not for everyone, and I couldn't be doing more than 1 or 2 leagues with that at most because it would drive me insane trying to keep track of stuff. Because
I looked at it this way when it really started getting popular a few years ago, or at least that I had seen it, and I was like, well, I'll just let them do the work for me. Let you guys do all the analyzing. Tell us who. Yeah, I'll let you do that one. I can't do it all. I couldn't imagine doing all the NFL players, college players, and Davey. We're talking high school, right?
No, some yes. This one is not high school players. You actually have to be on a college team.
Okay. All right, folks. We're talking some deep formats out there. It's great. Get in IDP. You get going. Real quick, I just wanted to make sure, are we going to give a little bit of advice, Kraig? I'd like to hear from you. What if you were a person that just been playing IDP for, say, a year or so, season or so, this is your first season, and you're getting ready to play the bye weeks this week, okay? You're in a standard-sized league. We're going to venture to say a couple of each position. What kind of advice would you give a person if they were doing it by themselves for the first time? What would be something to watch or go by to make a sound decision about a player for a bye week or filled in waiver wire pickup?
So the most basic thing that most sites give you access to is you can click on the player and get detailed information, not just showing their total points and what that equates to points per week. But I go in there and I try to look at how they're getting those points and then, sort of what their week to week looks like when it's broken down. Because you can have guys that are near the top of the list of total points and that can give you a nice, pretty number for weekly average. But then you go in there, they have, 3, 5, 7, and then 23 or something. It's like, well, that's a little bit deceptive. So that's the first thing that I look at. I would want to go and look at matchups. There's all different kinds of ways you can look at matchups. You can get into a deep tool like PFF that we know isn't the be-all, end-all, but that really gets into the weeds. Or you have your basic Yahoo telling you that Team X gives up the 5th most points to opposing linebackers.
Or get the Gridiron ratings start sit charts.
That would be a better place to go to than just looking at what MFL and Yahoo tell you, certainly. And you can go get all that information over at gridironratings.com and subscribe. And you should subscribe on YouTube as well, because I think we're sitting around 193 subscriptions or so. And once we hit 200, one of those Gridiron Ratings playbooks will be given away. So subscribe, and hopefully you'll be the lucky winner for that.
So James, same question that I asked Kraig.
Yeah, my first thought was to say, treat it how you treat streaming a quarterback. That's something that I think everyone has done at some point in their fantasy career, whether by intention or due to injury. And what do? Those quarterbacks, 13 through 25 in a 12-man league, they're all relatively similar. And some guys you like more than others. So you can eliminate some guys for whatever your reasons are. You can also find guys who you go, hey, just like Kraig said, oh, they have one really good week and then 4 mediocre weeks. Maybe I want to avoid that based on that point distribution. And then probably above all, you look at matchups and you go, hey, this guy's playing the Jaguars this week. I like that play. He's a 15th or so best quarterback, but that defense is atrocious. Why don't I roll with this because he's available right now? I think that that's the best advice you can give someone who's going, I don't know what to do. Obviously, if you have a guy like Darius Leonard on your team, you play Darius Leonard. There's not a lot of thought there. But when you're looking at those back half and kind of rotational roster spots, treat it like you treat a second-string quarterback, a guy who you don't necessarily want to let go, a guy who you don't necessarily think has the ceiling of being an elite one, but a guy who you can play matchups with. You can look at point distribution. What does your team need? Are you projected to lose by a lot? Do you need to go with someone who's got high variance and kind of swing for the fences? Or are you projected to win and you just want to make sure you hit a nice floor? It's the same way on Dirty O as it is on defense. You just look and you see and you project out what's likely to happen and you take what you can get.
Anything different you do, Gary?
Well, the only thing that I might add, the one that you was talking about with the average, and always open up these player cards and make sure that you see what kind of consistency. That was a great one right there. Probably the one I would have said. So I've been scrambling for a moment here. I think that the other kind of simple advice I could say is most sites that I've ever played on usually have a opponent rank or something, something you're indicating what their matchup might indicate. Actually pay attention to those if you have those, because usually they're based on what the points are allowed to those positions. It's in their formula some way. You can actually expand some of those, like on MFL, you hit that opponent rank, and open it up, and it'll tell you what it gave previous players and stuff. That MFL special though. So anyhow, yeah, pay attention to those ranks that their opponents you're going against, because they do make a difference. They do make a difference too.
And another thing is to pay attention to how your opponents use those ranks. In my league last week, my opponent loves to stream his linebackers. He added Zach Bond of the Saints, who's been atrocious. But the reason he added him is Sleeper, for whatever reason, their formula projected him to get 6.5 points, which he doesn't even have cumulative on the season. So he streamed him, and he got caught. And he got caught just adding whoever has the highest projected point total. If you're going to do it simply and you don't want to put in the effort to do research, which I can completely understand, just go, is this team good? And then make your decision off of that. They're playing the Jaguars. They're not good. I should probably maybe stream someone facing that type of team. Oh, are they playing Tampa Bay? That's a pretty good team. Maybe I want to avoid that. It's the most basic. It's got lots of flaws. But if you don't want to think and you want to have just quick click and go, that's the strategy I would employ.
Well, we're getting towards the end of our show here tonight, but remember, back at 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursday with host JJ Wenner. Gary will be back with the Dynasty Trip going over their weekend primer. Gary, before we start heading out here, do you have any words of wisdom for people heading into their Week 6 games?
I think be flexible. Be prepared to be flexible this year.
And I do have a question for you too. Have you trademarked Dirty O yet in regards to offense? Or
that's been brought up before, though. That's been brought up before. Yeah, over the years. Besides here at Gridiron Ratings, yes, because I've used that term for some time.
You got to get a shirt or something at least for people to buy out there.
Maybe as far back as when I was with the IDP guys in 2018. I think is when I got to first say it. It was doing broadcasts with them, doing lives. I'm like, oh man, all this dirty O.
I'll have to see if I can get a banner made up for behind me sometime.
We're an IDP podcast. Stop talking about offense.
James, anything you want to share with everyone before we leave?
Yeah, remember, it's week 6. There's 17 weeks now. You might be not doing well, or you might be doing really hot, but we're not halfway over yet. Things are still happening, and you can still come back and win. I always think back to the team that scored dead last in total points in my league, squeaked into the playoffs at 7-6, and then just steamrolled in the playoffs with tons of lucky matchups and tons of just absolute pure luck, but it happens. And I won a league with a team that was probably 10th best out of 12. So don't give up yet. Don't think that, oh, you're screwed. Don't go, oh, I have injuries. Plenty of people do. Remember, there's a lot of weeks. It's not just the weeks that have gone by.
You might as well answer this question.
I did want to say to that point, James, I have a league where I'm going for it now. It's that deep IDP league with cornerbacks and all that. My team is built to win now, and I started off 0-2, and it's one of those where you do need to take a step back, like you've told us for, how many weeks now. Be realistic. Don't panic. I wasn't going out making these crazy trades people were trying to get me to take. I've won 3 in a row, and I'm high points in the league right now. It's like these things can turn around, and every week gone is another opportunity to try to turn it around, and there is that breaking point, but we aren't there yet. So
before you read that, you guys can read the Dirty O, but what's been more frustrating for you guys, your offensive side or your defensive side of the ball this year? What's let you down when something's let you down?
Frankly, I haven't had that much letdown in my leagues. I've been playing the sport a long time, so I know I can just sit here and go, things have been going well. I haven't had the nightmare that I had last year.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I'm essentially wherever I go and I need to make a move, I've made a move that's been very well received. I haven't been stuck trying to search and find, a cornerback, for instance, or an edge rusher. If I went and added somebody, I've been qualified and satisfied and not hating the production I've added versus needing to keep streaming and streaming and streaming. So I'm having a lot of good variance right now. So I really don't have that much frustration. Yeah, I've had some, tough losses or squeaky by wins, but that always happens. In terms of just feeling unlucky, it really hasn't happened. So this is another great tip for all of you people out there. When you feel you're doing well, enjoy it, because all those frustrating times, like my past 5 seasons, I have not been happy. So now that I am doing well, I can sit back and enjoy it. This game is supposed to be fun.
And for the rest of you that are just deep freaks, like, just diehards, I gotta tell you, don't relax, get aggressive, do what you gotta do in those deep leagues, because there's one thing that we always know about offense. So say you got somebody gets hurt on offense, it's hard to replace them off the waiver wire. It's not that difficult when it comes to the defense. That pool is a lot larger. So you got to make some moves. You've got to work out waiver wire when you need to. But again, this is deep league. So, the vanilla is standard. There should be plenty of IDP meat. Just go with the game.
All right. So our question here, Gary, plug your ears here.
We got another one.
CEH and Higgins I'm going to guess it's T. Higgins, although it could be like Rashad Higgins, but we'll assume it's T. So CEH and T. Higgins for Mike Evans. Again, assumption just based off of the names involved. James, would you go about doing that one?
Simple answer, no. We could have a dynasty league here, which would change, values somewhat, but I want to win today, and it's week 6. I'm still trying to win today. I don't want to diversify my assets and use another roster spot to downgrade Evans for a guy who's hurt and a guy who, best case scenario, turns into Evans. So hard pass there. Again, if it's a dynasty league and you want to rebuild, I don't hate it, but I don't want to get out of a guy who's doing well to trade for an injured guy. That just seems like a backwards motion.
Yeah, I would consider this in a dynasty league. Depending on the rest of my team and all that. But in redraft right now, I'm not making that trade either. And then last one of the night here, 5-0, 10-team PPR with 2 flexes. Trade Eckler and Deontay Johnson for CMC and Jacoby Myers. The rest of his team is there.
Just no. I understand that CMC is greatness, but he's also relatively hurt. And Deontay Johnson is someone I'm buying pretty much all over the place. And is Eckler really performing that much worse than what CMC is going to be doing? I was high on selling Eckler to start the year, and I've been very, very wrong. And I don't think that a Justin Herbert-led offense is an offense that I want to diversify out of in order to snag Jacoby Myers. So, no, you're 5-0. You have a roster that looks good and looks deep. I'm not trying to snag a guy who high-end is elite and a number 1 guy, but also coming back from being hurt and was hurt last year. And it's just not where I'm going with this. Give me something better than Jacoby Myers with it, and we can talk.
I'm so bored.
I would keep Eckler and Deontay too. The difference between Eckler and CMC is not that much, and I would rather have Eckler at this point because to James's comment,
somebody else.
If you can't count on him, availability is the best ability, and he isn't giving it to you right now, as I have him on a couple teams. But that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you for those questions, despite Gary going to go shake his fist at some clouds after the show. We do. Make sure you tune in on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern to the Weekend Primer. Make sure you subscribe, click like, notification bell on YouTube, and you go over to gridironratings.com and subscribe there as well to get all of Gary's deep dives. For all of us here tonight, thank you for tuning in, and we'll talk to you later.